rain was a living thing, a ceaseless whisper that clawed at the edges of Daniel Carver's tent. It seeped through the canvas, pooling in the hollows of his makeshift shelter, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the unease gnawing at his chest. The Amazon stretched around him, an endless labyrinth of green and shadow, its canopy a suffocating shroud that swallowed the sun. He'd come here chasing whispers, fragments of a story too wild to dismiss, too vague to pin down. A monster, they'd said. Something ancient, something that didn't belong. The locals in the last village, a cluster of sagging huts teetering on the river's edge, had spoken in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the forest as if it might overhear. "It takes," one old woman had rasped, her fingers trembling around a cigarette. "It takes and it keeps." Daniel had scribbled it down in his notebook, the ink smudging under his damp hands, and told himself it was just folklore. He was an anthropologist, not a ghost hunter. But the deeper he trekked, the more the forest seemed to tighten around him, a predator sizing up its prey. By day 5, his supplies were dwindling. Damp crackers, a half-empty canteen, a flashlight that flickered like a dying pulse. The humidity pressed against his skin, a clammy hand he couldn't shake off, and the insects were merciless, their bites leaving welts that itched and burned. He'd found the first sign that morning, a footprint, or what might have been one, pressed into the mud near a stream. It was too large, too wrong. 5 toes, yes, but splayed unnaturally, the impression deep enough to suggest a weight no human could carry. He'd knelt beside it, his breath catching as he traced its edges with a trembling finger. The forest had gone silent then. The usual chorus of birds and cicadas snuffed out like a cannon. He told himself it was a coincidence, a trick of exhaustion, but the hairs on his neck stood rigid, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, the dreams started. He woke gasping, the tense damp walls closing in, his mind tangled in images he couldn't place, twisted limbs, eyes that glowed like embers, a voice that wasn't a voice but a pressure inside his skull. He fumbled for his notebook, scribbling what he could remember, but the words blurred into nonsense, ink bleeding across the page. The rain pounded harder, a roar that drowned his thoughts, and he swore he heard something else beneath it. A low, guttural hum that vibrated through the earth. He clutched his flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, but the light only made the shadows thicker, coiling like smoke around the trees. He told himself it was fatigue, dehydration, the isolation playing tricks. He'd push on tomorrow, find the source of the rumors, and get out. That was the plan. Morning brought no relief. The sky was a bruise, heavy with clouds that refused to break, and the air smelled of rot, sharp and sickly sweet. He packed his gear, his hands unsteady, and followed the stream deeper into the forest. The footprint had been a fluke, he reasoned. A jaguar, maybe distorted by the mud. But then he found the second sign, a tree, its trunk split open as if clawed apart, sap oozing like blood from the wound. The gashes were too high, too wide, scored with a force that made his stomach lurch. He took a photo. The camera's click obscenely loud in the stillness, and noticed something else. A faint trail, a scattering of broken branches leading north. Against every instinct screaming at him to turn back, he followed. The trail wound through the undergrowth, a path no animal would carve, too deliberate, too purposeful. Vines hung like nooses, brushing his face as he pushed forward, and the hum was back, louder now, a resonance that buzzed in his teeth. He stumbled into a clearing, and the world tilted. Bones littered the ground, small ones, bird-like mingled with larger fragments, ribs and femurs that could have been human. Arranged in a spiral, a grotesque mandala radiating from a slab of stone at the center. The stone was black, polished to an unnatural sheen, its surface etched with symbols he didn't recognize, jagged, spiraling lines that seemed to writhe when he stared too long. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the bones, and the hum became a pulse, a heartbeat that synced with his own. He shouldn't have touched it. He knew it the moment his fingers brushed the stone, cold and slick despite the heat. The air thickened, pressing against his lungs, and the forest erupted into sound. Screeches, rustles, a cacophony that clawed at his ears. He yanked his hand back, but it was too late. The symbols glowed, a sickly green that pulsed in time with the hum, and the ground trembled. He staggered, his flashlight slipping from his grip, its beam spinning wildly before winking out. Darkness swallowed him, and in that darkness something moved. It was massive, a shadow that dwarfed the trees, its outline shifting as if it couldn't decide on a shape. Limbs, too many limbs, twisted and stretched, tipped with claws that gleamed wetly in the faint light leaking through the canopy. Its head, if it had one, was a mass of angles and hollows, and its eyes, God, its eyes burned into him, twin furnaces of amber that stripped him bare. He couldn't scream, couldn't move, his body locked in a vice of terror. The thing didn't lunge, didn't strike, it simply watched, and that was worse. He felt it peeling back his mind, rifling through his memories, his fears, tasting them. The hum was inside him now, a voice without words, promising things he couldn't comprehend. Power, knowledge, an end to the loneliness that had driven him here. All he had to do was stay, be or ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth, thorns tearing at his skin, his breath a ragged sob. The forest warped around him, trees bending inward, roots snaking across his path. He didn't know how long he fled, only that the thing followed, a presence at his back, its gaze a weight he couldn't shake. When he finally collapsed, his legs gave out beside a river, its waters black and still. He stared into it, his reflection, a gaunt, hollow-eyed stranger, and saw something else, ripples spreading from the center, a shape rising beneath the surface. He scrambled back, but the riverbank crumbled, and he fell. The water was ice, a shock that jolted him awake, but it wasn't water. It was thick, viscous, clinging to him like oil. He thrashed, his hands clawing at nothing, and the hum filled his skull, drowning out his screams. Shapes moved in the depths, limbs, faces, fragments of things that might have been human once, their mouths open in silent agony. He broke the surface, gasping, and found himself not in the river, but in a cavern, its walls slick with the same black liquid. The stone slab was there, glowing faintly, and the monster loomed above it, its form more solid now, a colossus of flesh and shadow that defied geometry. Its eyes locked onto him, and he understood. This wasn't its lair, this was its prison. The revelation came not as a thought, but as a flood, images and sensations crashing into him. The monster wasn't a creature of the forest. It was older, infinitely older, a shard of something that had existed before the earth, cooled before the stars burned. It had been bound here, trapped by forces he couldn't name, its essence seeping into the land, twisting it. The bones, the symbols, the hum, they were echoes of its struggle, its hunger, and he'd woken it. His touch had loosened the chains, given it a tether to the world above. It didn't want to kill him. It wanted to use him, to ride his mind back into the light, to unravel everything he knew and remake it in its image. He tried to fight it, to claw his way back to sanity, but the hum was a tide, pulling him under. He saw the village burning, the river boiling, the forest withering as the thing spread, its limbs stretching across continents, its eyes multiplying in the sky. He saw himself at its center, a hollow puppet, his voice chanting words that tore reality apart, and beneath it all, a truth so vast it crushed him. This was no monster. It was a god, or what gods feared, a remnant of a cosmos that had birthed and devoured itself long before humanity crawled from the mud. To know it was to invite it, to see it was to become its doorway. He woke on the riverbank, the sun a faint smear above the canopy, his clothes soaked but clean. The forest was silent again, the hum gone, the stone and the cavern a fading nightmare. He stumbled back to his tent, gathered his gear, and fled, the journey a blur of panic and exhaustion. He made it to the village, then a boat, then a plane, each mile a lifeline pulling him from the abyss. But the dreams didn't stop. They grew sharper, more vivid, the monster's eyes waiting behind his own whenever he closed them. He burned his notes, deleted his photos, told himself it was over. But he felt it still, a splinter lodged in his soul, watching, waiting. Months later, in a sterile apartment far from the jungle, he sat at his desk, hands trembling as he wrote. Not a report, not a confession, but a warning. The words spilled out, disjointed, desperate. Don't look for it. Don't ask. The unknown isn't a puzzle, it's a trap. We chase it because we think we're hunters, but we're prey. To seek it is to call it. And what answers isn't ours to survive? He stared at the page, the ink steady for once, and felt the hum flicker at the edge of his mind, a reminder that some doors once opened, never close. He tore the paper to shreds, but the weight remained, a shadow he'd carry to his grave and beyond.